The first note that escaped Ethan's lips seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his 12-year-old body should have been capable of reaching. It was pure, raw, and carried a weight of emotion that immediately changed the energy in the room. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. The snickering stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the judges, who had been shuffling papers and checking their phones, looked up with sudden attention. Ethan's voice wasn't technically perfect like Madison's or pitch perfect like Ryan's, but it had something those polished performances lacked. It had soul. Every word seemed to carry the weight of real loss, real pain, real hope. His voice cracked slightly on, "That saved a wretch like me." And instead of being a flaw, it made the moment more honest, more human. I once was lost, but now I'm found. I watched as Rebecca Walsh slowly put down her pen. Michael Torres leaned forward in his chair. Jennifer Stone's expression had completely changed from polite disinterest to genuine surprise. But it was what happened in the audience that truly amazed me. Madison's mother, who had been loudly coaching her daughter through vocal exercises moments before, was now completely silent. Ryan's professional team had stopped their strategic discussions. Every parent, every child, every production assistant in the room was transfixed. Was blind, but now I see. When Ethan sang those words, his eyes opened and found mine across the room. In that moment, I saw something I hadn't seen in him for 2 years: confidence. Not the artificial kind that comes from expensive coaching, but the real kind that emerges when someone discovers their true gift. The room was so quiet you could hear the heating system cycling on. Ethan's voice filled every corner of the space, and for those 30 seconds, a simple hymn sung by a boy in thrift store clothes transformed a competitive audition into something sacred. When the last note faded, the silence stretched on for what felt like minutes. Ethan stood there, slightly breathless, looking uncertain again as the spell of his performance began to break. Then something unprecedented happened. Rebecca Walsh stood up. Not the polite, obligatory standing that judges sometimes do, but a genuine, compelled to her feet kind of standing. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Michael Torres followed, then Jennifer Stone. The 3 judges were on their feet, and the confused murmur that had started in the audience died completely. "Ethan," Rebecca said, her voice softer than it had been all day, "that was... How long have you been singing?" "Since I was little," Ethan replied, his confidence already wavering as he became aware of all the eyes on him. "My mom taught me." "And you said she passed away?" I felt my stomach clench. The lie I'd told to protect him was now center stage, and I prayed he'd stick to our story. "Yes, ma'am. 2 years ago." Rebecca exchanged a look with the other judges. "Ethan, I need you to understand something. In 15 years of doing this, I've heard thousands of young voices. Most are technically proficient. Some are even exceptional. But what you just did, you didn't just sing that song. You lived it." Jennifer Stone nodded. "There's something in your voice, a depth of emotion that usually takes decades to develop. It's remarkable." But then Michael Torres spoke up, and his tone was more cautious. "Ethan, that was beautiful, truly. But this is a contemporary music competition. The show format requires adaptability to different genres, working with professional arrangements, performing with backing tracks and choreography. I'm concerned about weather." He didn't finish the sentence, but everyone in the room understood. The subtext was clear. Can this kid from nowhere, with no training and no resources, actually compete in a professional environment? I watched Ethan's face fall as the reality of our situation crashed back in. The magic of his performance was already being analyzed, categorized, and found potentially inadequate for the commercial demands of television. "I understand," Ethan said quietly, stepping back from the microphone. "Wait," Rebecca said, holding up her hand. "We're not finished here." She looked at her fellow judges. "I'd like to hear something else. Ethan, do you know any contemporary songs? Anything from the radio?" The autumn air in Nashville was crisp that October morning as I sat in my beat-up Honda Civic outside the Grand Ole Opry Auditorium. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped the steering wheel, watching families with polished children walk confidently toward the entrance of America's Next Young Star auditions. "Dad, maybe we should just go home," whispered my 12-year-old son, Ethan, from the back seat. His voice carried that familiar uncertainty that had grown stronger over the past 2 years since his mother left us. I turned to look at him through the rearview mirror. His oversized thrift store clothes hung loose on his thin frame, and his unruly brown hair desperately needed a professional cut, something our budget couldn't accommodate. But when he looked up at me, those bright green eyes still held a flicker of the dream we'd been chasing. "Son, we've come this far," I said, trying to inject confidence into my voice despite feeling anything but confident myself. "Remember what you told me after your mom's funeral? That you wanted to sing for her?" The lie came easily now. Ethan's mother hadn't died. She'd simply decided that a struggling construction worker and his weird son who preferred singing to sports weren't worth sticking around for. But I've been telling Ethan she passed away from an illness for 2 years now, unable to bear explaining that some people just choose to abandon the ones they're supposed to love. We walked through the glass doors into chaos. The lobby buzzed with nervous energy, perfectly coiffed children warming up with their vocal coaches, and parents who clearly belonged to a different economic class than us. Designer clothes, professional headshots, and equipment that probably cost more than my monthly rent surrounded us. "Next group, please approach the registration table," called a production assistant with a clipboard and a Bluetooth headset. As we approached, I noticed the subtle once-over the staff member gave us, taking in my worn work boots, Ethan's thrift store outfit, and our complete lack of professional presentation materials. Her smile was polite but distant. "Name of the contestant?" "Ethan Murphy," I replied, handing over the registration forms we'd printed at the public library. She glanced at the paperwork, then at us again. "Is this his headshot?" she asked, looking at the simple photo we'd taken with my phone and printed at Walgreens. "Yes, ma'am." "And his vocal coach information?" "He doesn't have a vocal coach. He's self-taught." The woman's eyebrows raised slightly, and I caught her exchanging a look with another staff member. "I see. Well, he'll be in Group C. Please take a seat in the waiting area." Groups are called alphabetically, so you'll have about a 3-hour wait. Those 3 hours felt like an eternity. Around us, other children ran through elaborate vocal exercises with their coaches, parents discussed strategies with managers, and everyone seemed to know exactly what they were doing. We sat quietly in our corner, Ethan occasionally humming softly to himself while I pretended to read a magazine I'd grabbed from the table. "Dad," Ethan whispered during hour 2. "Everyone here seems so professional. Maybe I'm not good enough for this." I put my arm around his shoulders, feeling how tense he was. "Ethan, talent isn't about having the most expensive clothes or the fanciest coach. It's about what comes from in here," I said, tapping his chest. "And you've got more heart than anyone in this room." But as I looked around at the polished competition, I couldn't shake my own doubts. Were we fooling ourselves? Was I setting my son up for heartbreak? When Group C was finally called, we found ourselves in a large rehearsal room with about 30 other kids and their families. 3 judges sat at a long table. Rebecca Walsh, a Grammy-winning country singer, Michael Torres, a renowned voice coach, and Jennifer Stone, a television producer known for discovering young talent. "All right, everyone," Rebecca announced with a practiced smile. "We're going to go through each contestant one by one. When I call your name, step forward, introduce yourself, and give us your best 30 seconds. Remember, we're looking for that special something, that spark that can't be taught." One by one, the children performed. Each seemed more polished than the last. There was Madison, whose parents had flown in from California with a full entourage. She belted out a Whitney Houston song with technical precision that left the judges nodding approvingly. Then came Ryan, a 10-year-old with perfect pitch who'd been performing professionally since age 6. His rendition of a Bruno Mars hit was flawless. "Ethan Murphy," Rebecca called. My heart hammered against my ribs as Ethan slowly walked to the center of the room. He looked impossibly small standing there, his shoulders hunched slightly forward in that defensive posture he'd developed since the bullying at school had gotten worse. "Hi," he said quietly into the microphone they handed him. "I'm Ethan, and I'm 12 years old." "A little louder, sweetheart," Jennifer encouraged, but I caught the subtle glance she shared with Michael. They'd already made up their minds based on his appearance. I'm Ethan Murphy. I'm 12, and I'm going to sing Amazing Grace, he said, his voice stronger now. A few snickers rippled through the room. Amazing Grace? At a contemporary music competition? I saw other parents exchanging amused looks, and my cheeks burned with embarrassment. Rebecca leaned forward. That's an interesting choice, Ethan. Is there a reason you picked a traditional hymn instead of something more contemporary? Ethan was quiet for a moment, and I could see him fighting back tears. My mom used to sing it to me, he said simply. She had the most beautiful voice in the world. More whispers from the crowd. I heard someone behind us mutter, "Poor kid doesn't even understand what kind of competition this is." "Well," Rebecca said with forced kindness, "let's hear it then." Ethan closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and opened his mouth. What came out was nothing like I expected. Ethan thought for a moment. I know some Johnny Cash songs, and some Beatles. My mom had their CDs. A few more snickers from the audience. Classic rock and country weren't exactly contemporary pop, and everyone knew it. "How about Hey Jude?" Rebecca suggested. "Can you give us just a verse and the chorus?" Ethan nodded and closed his eyes again. When he opened his mouth this time, something even more extraordinary happened. "Hey Jude, don't be afraid." He took the Beatles classic and made it entirely his own. His voice had a rougher quality now, less pure than the hymn, but more contemporary. He instinctively found the emotional core of the song, the comfort, the encouragement, the assurance that everything would be okay. But it was what he did with na section that left everyone speechless. Instead of the typical joyful Beatles ending, Ethan's version became a lament, a cry of longing that seemed to encompass every loss, every disappointment, every hope deferred. When he finished, the judges didn't just stand this time. Rebecca Walsh walked around the table and approached him directly. "Ethan," she said, kneeling down to his eye level, "I want you to listen to me very carefully. What you have, this gift, it can't be taught. It can't be bought. It can't be manufactured. It just is." She stood back up and addressed the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've just witnessed something special. This young man doesn't just sing songs, he tells stories. He makes you feel." Michael Torres was nodding now. The technical skills can be developed. The performance aspects can be learned. But what he has naturally, that's the foundation everything else is built on. Jennifer Stone was already making notes. "Ethan, we'd like you to advance to the next round. But I have to be honest with you, it's going to be challenging. You'll be working with professional musicians, learning choreography, adapting to different styles. Are you willing to work hard?" Ethan looked back at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. I nodded encouragingly, though my own mind was racing. Next round meant more competition, more professional families with resources we didn't have, more opportunities for humiliation. But also meant hope. "Yes, ma'am," Ethan said. "I'll work as hard as I need to." Rebecca smiled. "Good. We'll see you in Los Angeles in 3 weeks." As we walked out of the audition room, I could hear the buzz of conversation behind us. Some of it was admiring, but plenty was skeptical. "Cute, but can he really compete? Great voice, but look at them. They're completely out of their element. This isn't a charity case competition." Ethan heard it too. As we reached the lobby, his excitement was already dimming. "Dad," he said quietly, "what if they're right? What if I don't belong here?" I stopped walking and knelt down in front of him, right there in the busy lobby. "Son, let me tell you something about belonging. You don't earn your place by looking like everyone else or having what they have. You earn it by being so genuinely yourself that people can't ignore you." But even as I said the words, I wondered if I was setting us both up for an even bigger fall. 3 weeks later, we were standing in the heart of Los Angeles, surrounded by palm trees, endless traffic, and the kind of wealth that seemed to seep from every polished surface. The production company had put us up in a mid-range hotel that felt luxurious to us, but was clearly the budget option compared to where some of the other families were staying. Our first morning in LA, I woke up at 5 a.m. to the sound of Ethan practicing softly in the bathroom, trying not to wake other hotel guests. He'd been doing that for weeks, finding quiet places to work on the contemporary songs the show had sent us to learn. The local librarian back home had helped us find YouTube videos of the original performances, and Ethan had been teaching himself the melodies and arrangements by ear. "Ready for today, kiddo?" I asked as we grabbed the complimentary continental breakfast in the hotel lobby. I think so, he said, but I could see the anxiety in the way he kept checking his phone for the time, the way he picked at his cereal instead of eating it. The production facility was in Burbank, a sprawling complex of sound stages and office buildings that screamed professional entertainment industry. As our Uber pulled up to the security gate, I saw other families arriving in luxury cars, some with what appeared to be personal assistants carrying equipment cases and garment bags. "Welcome to Hollywood Week," announced the perky production assistant who greeted our group of 20 advancing contestants. "Over the next 3 days, you'll be working with professional vocal coaches, learning choreography, and preparing for your final performance in front of our celebrity guest judges." She led us through a maze of corridors lined with gold records and promotional photos from the network's biggest hits. Everything was designed to impress, to make us feel both honored to be there and intimidated by the level of success surrounding us. "Parents, you'll be in the observation lounge during coaching sessions. Contestants, follow me to studio." I watched Ethan disappear through a set of double doors with the other kids, noticing how he instinctively gravitated toward the back of the group, trying to make himself less noticeable. The observation lounge was exactly what you'd expect. Comfortable seating facing a wall of monitors showing different angles of the coaching sessions. I found a spot next to a friendly-looking woman in her 40s who introduced herself as Carol, Madison's mom. "Your son has such a unique voice," she said warmly, and I felt myself relax slightly. Madison was talking about his audition the whole flight here. "Thank you. Madison's incredibly talented, too." "Oh, she's been training for this her whole life. Voice lessons since age 4, performance coaching, the works." Carol paused, studying me. "What's Ethan's training background?" "He's self-taught mostly." Carol's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Not unkind, but suddenly more cautious. Wow. That's really something." On the monitors, I watched Ethan work with Marcus Sterling, a vocal coach who'd worked with some of the biggest names in pop music. The song they'd assigned him was Counting Stars by OneRepublic, contemporary, upbeat, and completely different from anything he'd ever performed. "Ethan, I need you to find the energy in this song," Marcus was saying. "It's not a ballad. It's not a hymn. This is about youthful rebellion, about dreams and taking chances. Can you find that feeling?" I watched my son nod and attempt the song again. His voice was still beautiful, still pure, but something was missing. The raw emotion that had captivated everyone in Nashville seemed muted, constrained by the unfamiliar style and arrangement. "It's not bad," Marcus continued, "but it's not connecting. You're singing the notes correctly, but you're not selling the story. What's this song about to you?" Ethan looked confused. I'm not sure. That's the problem. You have to make it personal. Every song you perform has to mean something to you, or it won't mean anything to the audience." Over the next 2 days, I watched Ethan struggle in ways I'd never seen before. The choreography was simple for most kids, but he'd never danced and felt awkward and behind. The contemporary arrangements of his assigned songs didn't suit his natural style. Most challenging of all, the other contestants had formed social groups based on their shared experiences in professional training and competition, leaving Ethan largely on the outside. "How was practice today?" I'd ask each evening. "Fine," he'd answer, but his enthusiasm was clearly waning. On the second night, I found him sitting by the hotel pool at 10 p.m., staring at the reflection of the city lights on the water. "Can't sleep?" I asked, sitting beside him. "Dad, I don't think I belong here." There was the fear I'd been dreading since Nashville. Everyone else has been doing this forever. Madison's been on stage since she was tiny. Ryan has a manager and everything. They all know how to move, how to perform, how to be professional. I just sing songs. I felt my heart breaking for him. "Ethan, do you remember what Rebecca Walsh said? That what you have can't be taught. But maybe what can be taught is more important," he said quietly. "Maybe being natural isn't enough." "Son, look at me." I waited until he met my eyes. "Your mother." I caught myself. "Your mother loved your voice exactly as it is. She used to say you could sing the phone book and make people cry." It was true. His mother had said that, back when she still cared enough to pay attention to her son's gifts. But that was different. This is television. This is professional. And maybe that's exactly what makes you special here. Maybe in a world full of people trying to sound like everyone else, being yourself is the most professional thing you can do. But looking at his defeated posture, I wasn't sure my words were getting through. The next morning was the final performance day. Each contestant would perform their assigned song in front of the celebrity guest judges, and half would be eliminated. The other half would move on to the live television rounds. As we arrived at the studio, the energy was completely different. Professional camera crews were everywhere. The lighting was more dramatic, and there was a palpable sense that this was no longer practice. This was showtime. "Contestants, you'll draw numbers for performance order," announced the head producer. Ethan drew number 18 out of 20, almost last, which meant watching nearly everyone else perform before his turn, which meant more time to get nervous and second-guess himself. We sat in the green room as one by one, the other kids delivered polished professional performances. Madison sang Ariana Grande with choreography that looked like it belonged in a music video. Ryan performed Bruno Mars with the kind of showmanship that comes from years of professional coaching. Each performance was technically excellent, commercially viable, and utterly predictable. "Number 18, Ethan Murphy, you're up." I watched him walk toward the stage entrance, his shoulders hunched in that defensive posture again, and I felt a sinking certainty that we'd come all this way only to watch his dream die on national television. But sometimes, when everything seems lost, that's exactly when magic decides to make an appearance. The stage lights were blindingly bright as Ethan walked to center stage, and for a moment he stood there blinking, trying to adjust to the intensity. The three celebrity guest judges, pop superstar Lisa Chun, country legend Robert Hayes, and R&B icon Monica Williams, sat at their imposing table, their expressions politely neutral. Behind them, in the darkened audience, I could see the other contestants and their families, the production crew, and network executives. Everyone was waiting, but not with anticipation. After 17 polished performances, they were waiting for this awkward kid to get through his song so they could move on to the more promising contestants. "Ethan Murphy," Lisa Chun announced, reading from her notes. 12 years old from Nashville, Tennessee. "You'll be performing Counting Stars by OneRepublic." The backing track began, upbeat, contemporary, everything that didn't suit Ethan's natural style. He started singing the first verse, and while his voice was still beautiful, it was clear he was struggling. The energy the song demanded wasn't there. He looked stiff, uncomfortable, like he was wearing clothes that didn't fit. I saw some audience members checking their phones. A few of the other contestants were whispering to each other. Even the judges seemed to be going through the motions, writing notes that I suspected weren't particularly encouraging. Then, about 30 seconds into the song, something went wrong with the backing track. A technical glitch caused the music to cut out completely, leaving Ethan's voice hanging alone in the sudden silence. For a moment, he looked panicked. The judges looked annoyed. A production assistant started rushing toward the sound booth to fix the technical issue. But then Ethan did something that no one expected. Instead of stopping, instead of waiting for the track to restart, he kept singing. But without the contemporary arrangement constraining him, his voice found its natural home. The pop melody transformed into something completely different, slower, more soulful, stripped down to its emotional core. All my life I've been living in the fast lane. But now the words weren't about youthful rebellion. In Ethan's voice, they became a lament about childhood lost too soon, about growing up too fast because circumstances demanded it. The production assistant stopped mid-stride. The judges looked up from their notes. The audience stopped fidgeting. "Take that money, watch it burn, sink in the river, the lessons I learned." Without the backing track, you could hear every nuance of his voice. The slight roughness that came from years of singing without formal training. The way he bent certain notes not because he'd been taught to, but because that's how the emotion demanded they be sung. The crack in his voice that turned a line about counting stars into a prayer for hope. Lisa Chun slowly put down her pen. Robert Hayes leaned forward in his chair. Monica Williams was staring at Ethan like she was seeing him for the first time. But it was what happened in the audience that truly showed the power of what was occurring. Madison, who had delivered a flawless pop performance an hour earlier, was sitting with her mouth slightly open. Ryan, the technically perfect 10-year-old, had stopped whispering with his team and was completely focused on the stage. Parents who had been networking and strategizing were now silent, watching this boy transform a contemporary pop song into something timeless. Everything that drowns me makes me want to fly. When Ethan sang those words, his eyes found mine in the darkened audience, and I saw something I hadn't seen since his mother left. Not just confidence, but joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy in the act of singing itself, separate from competition or judgment or professional ambition. The technical crew had fixed the backing track by now, but no one moved to restart it. The silence around Ethan's voice had become part of the performance, creating an intimacy in a large studio that made everyone feel like they were witnessing something private and sacred. As he approached the end of the song, Ethan closed his eyes and sang the final lines with such quiet intensity that you could hear people in the audience holding their breath. Everything that drowns me makes me want to fly. The last note faded into complete silence. No one moved. No one applauded. The moment was too fragile, too perfect to break with conventional responses. Then Lisa Chun stood up. Not the polite standing ovation of a judge acknowledging a good performance, but the involuntary rising of someone who had been genuinely moved. Her eyes were bright with tears she wasn't trying to hide. Robert Hayes followed, then Monica Williams. The three celebrity judges were on their feet, but more than that, they looked shaken. "Ethan," Lisa said, her voice softer than I'd heard it all day. "What just happened here?" The track stopped, so I just kept going," Ethan said, suddenly uncertain again. "No," Monica interrupted. "What just happened is you reminded all of us why we fell in love with music in the first place. You took a contemporary pop song and made it into a folk ballad. You found the soul in a song that was written for radio play and turned it into something that belongs in Carnegie Hall." Robert Hayes nodded. "Son, I've been in this business for 30 years. I've heard voices that could shatter glass and voices that could charm birds from trees. But what you just did, you didn't just sing that song. You rewrote it. You made it yours in a way that most professional artists never managed to do. But it was what Lisa Chun said next that changed everything. Ethan, I want you to understand something. Everyone who performed before you today was very good. Technically proficient, professionally trained, market ready. But you're an artist. And there's a difference." She walked around the judge's table and approached the stage, something I'd never seen a judge do during the entire competition. When her backing track cut out, you had a choice. You could have stopped, waited for it to be fixed, given us the performance you'd prepared. Instead, you showed us who you really are as a performer. You showed us that you don't need fancy arrangements or perfect production. You showed us that your voice is enough. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. But more than that, she continued, you showed us something that's been missing from a lot of contemporary music: authenticity, vulnerability, the willingness to let your real self show up in your performance. Monica Williams spoke up from her seat. "Ethan, can I ask you something? When the track stopped, why didn't you stop too?" Ethan thought for a moment. I guess I was singing for my mom, and she would have wanted me to keep going." The silence that followed was profound. Several people in the audience were wiping their eyes now, including some of the other contestants' parents. "Ladies and gentlemen," Robert Hayes announced, standing and addressing the full audience, "we've just witnessed something special. This young man didn't just advance to the next round. He reminded all of us what this competition is supposed to be about." But then he turned back to Ethan, his expression more serious. "Son, I need you to understand something. What you did here today was beautiful, but the live television rounds are going to be different. You'll be performing for millions of people, working with bigger productions, facing expectations that might try to change who you are as an artist. The question is, can you hold on to what makes you special while adapting to that professional environment?" Ethan looked back at me one more time, and I nodded encouragingly. "Yes, sir," he said. "I think I understand now. It's not about sounding like everyone else. It's about making every song sound like me." Lisa Chun smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from any judge all day. "Exactly. Ethan Murphy, congratulations. You're going to Hollywood. As we walked out of the studio that evening, Ethan was quiet. Not the defeated quiet of the previous days, but the thoughtful quiet of someone processing a major realization. "Dad," he finally said as we waited for our ride back to the hotel, "I think I know what Mom would have said about today." "What's that, son?" "She would have said that the most important thing isn't whether I win or lose. It's whether I remember who I am." I put my arm around his shoulders, feeling prouder than I'd ever felt in my life. "She would have been right," I said. "And son, she would have been so proud of you today." As our car pulled away from the studio, I caught sight of Ethan's reflection in the window. For the first time in 2 years, he wasn't hunching his shoulders. He was sitting up straight, looking forward, ready for whatever came next. The competition was far from over, but something had fundamentally changed. My son had found his voice, not just as a singer, but as an artist and as a person. And in that moment, I realized that no matter what happened in the live rounds, we had already won the only thing that really mattered. We had found our way back to hope.